I've got something in my front pocket for you. Why don't you reach on in my pocket and see what it is? Then grab onto it, it's just for you. Give it a little squeeze and say, how do you do? Something in my front pocket for you. Why don't you reach on in my pocket and see what it is? Then grab onto it, it's just for you. Give it a little squeeze and say, how do you do? There's something in my front pocket. There's something in my front pocket. There's something in my front pocket.
All right, welcome to another episode of Talk Gaming. Fun fact, I just recorded this entire episode and then realized that it was taking the audio from my webcam, the C920, as opposed to from this mic. Reason is because when I first booted up XSplit, it wasn't plugged in, and then I closed it and reopened it, but it kept the same automatic selection, which was the only mic that was plugged in, which was the webcam. So I recorded something for an hour and 10 minutes, got it into Premiere to start fixing it up, and realized that it was unusable. So I went to Dutch Bros, not a sponsor. I just love every drink that they have on their menu. Highly recommend it if you have one locally. I don't know, I think they're in like California, Texas, around there. They're all over the place. Great coffee. I love it. But yeah, I got caffeine, extra couple shots. We're going to redo this. It's St. Paddy's Day, so I'm going to try to get this done relatively quickly. We'll probably stick to about the hour-ish format, and then I'm going to go have some corned beef because it's awesome. My family actually just found out that we might not be as Scottish as we thought we were. We might actually have a lot of Irish blood in us, and my entire family's taking it pretty hard. So we're going to celebrate the holiday. We're going to have a good time. It's going to be okay. It's funny because when you're Scottish, you always are teasing the Irish and you're constantly just mocking them. Like my sisters all do Scottish Highland dance. Like they wear the kilts and then they do the sword dance where they get a sword and then they put it out like real swords, lay them out on the ground in a cross, and then you dance over them. And my sister Mary, she just got married, moved to Michigan. I have a vlog about it all on my vlogging channel you should check out. But she was really, really competitive, and she became like an advanced Highland dancer. Like she was really, really good. She still is. But yeah, when you're Scottish, you always are teasing the Irish. And when you're Irish, you're teasing the Scottish, because Irish dancing is like this weird clippity cloppity thing. The girls wear big wigs. It looks like well, I got to be careful how I tease it now, because I might actually have just as much Irish blood in me as Scottish blood, because my uncle... Is it my uncle? I think it's my uncle. He is getting like one of those blood tests done that maps out your whole genealogy. And so we're going to find out what our purest form is, which will be interesting at the very least. That's all beside the point. The show's Talk Gaming, not is Luke Irish. But we got some fun topics today. One topic we're going to discuss, probably for the majority of the show, actually has to do specifically with something that came about today. Specifically, when I woke up this morning, I was reading all about it, and people have been asking me to cover it, so I'll talk about it. And that, of course, is Mass Effect Andromeda. But first, I want to respond to some comments I got. Now, as many of you know, also, if I'm ever drifting over here, it's because I have two monitors. The webcam is on top of the first one, which has my XSplit set up, and then this one is the one that screen caps. And so I actually like keep an eye on this one when I'm pulling something up to show you. So as many of you guys know, I want to show you this. I did a video on Mass Effect Andromeda, or not Mass Effect, Horizon Zero Dawn, and talked all about it. Yeah, The Witcher 3 was way better. There's no question. That's not even like a question or up for debate. Like it's way better. But you guys had some really interesting comments and stuff that I thought was really really interesting, and I want to talk about it all. So first things first, the comment that I got the most was people wondering why didn't you talk about the story specifically? Why didn't you talk about the fact that the game seems to be a big push for this sort of politically correct diversity, which the gaming community is highly sensitive to in the modern day. People just don't like being lectured to, which is understandable. Nobody likes being lectured to, whether you're a teenager living with your parents and your dad is trying to lecture you on something you did at homecoming. I mean, nobody likes being lectured, especially when you're an adult trying to participate in a hobby that you've been participating in since you were a toddler, and now they're telling you that you're a sexist, racist, whatever, if you have any objections to it. So let me actually switch this out, because right now I'm showing Mass Effect gameplay, and that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Can I switch it? Yeah, there we go. See, I'm getting used to XSplit now. So next week we will be going live. I'm going to actually make myself a note right now to discuss it at the end of the show, so you know when to come and see the show live on YouTube. It'll also be cataloged so you can watch it after. You don't have to watch it live, but if you watch it live, then I can actually tell you about certain things, or I can respond to your questions, things like that, which would be really cool. Let's be real. But with all that said, a lot of people were asking, can you talk about the whole matriarchal push in Horizon Zero Dawn? One particular commenter said that the game seems to portray women as strong, independent, fierce warriors and men as their servants, sort of. The game, of course, is set in a matriarchal culture. At least the Nora tribe is. You have the All-Mother, which is their god. No spoilers, but you have the All-Mother, which is their god. The heads of their little culture there are three women. Aloy, of course, the protagonist, is a girl. And the reason I didn't talk about it in the review was because I don't think it matters for this game in particular. There's certain games where it does bug me, or it's clear that that was just to try to lecture gamers about how bad or sexist they are, but this was not one of them. I felt that this was done at least in a delicate way, or a tasteful way, or in a way that was consistent. What drives me crazy is when you are playing a game and you get involved in this world, in this universe, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, stuff happens that totally is not believable, based on the things that they had already set up. So I require consistency whenever I am looking at a game or a work of fiction in general. I look for some amount of consistency. That's why in Uncharted 4, when Nadine shows up, and Nathan Drake, for instance, in Uncharted 2, Uncharted 3, I believe it's Uncharted 2, he goes and he starts he does a whole like hour-and-a-half section of gameplay, or maybe, yeah, to make my point even clearer, I think it was Uncharted 2. Uncharted 2, there's a plane crash. Basically, Nathan Drake ends up in the desert. It's either 2 or 3, but in one of the games, he ends up in a desert. He's got to walk all the way. He's completely dehydrated, and he goes through it, and he's weak, and it seems like, oh, well, this guy, clearly they had this happen for some reason. And then he goes and he fights all these people, and then he just gets up and keeps walking, and all of a sudden he's fine. He's right as rain. I had a problem with that because it broke the rules that the game at least had set up. I can play Horizon Zero Dawn even though it's full of robotic dinosaurs. Even though my brain knows that those don't exist, I can accept that they exist because it works within the framework that I have accepted as reality, as that reality. So, I mean, there's all sorts of examples of this. In The Last of Us, for instance, the game is like 4 years old. I don't think this counts as a spoiler. If you haven't played The Last of Us, skip ahead like 2 minutes, okay? Just saying that. Okay, you've had your warning. In The Last of Us, there's a section where Joel falls on a piece of rebar and it punctures him through and through. And it's very serious injury. And he's basically comatose. He's in a catatonic state. In the DLC, you find out and you see him even more in a catatonic state. He's almost in a coma. He's laying on a little like sled that she built for him. Ellie built for him, and she drags him around, and that's how she navigates. And then she puts him in the basement of a house as dealing with, that was weird. That's weird. Have you ever had that when you like inhale and you choke on yourself? That's basically what happened. I choke on myself a lot. Out of context quote of the day. But like Ellie puts him in the basement and she runs off, and then all of a sudden afterwards she gives him a little injection of antibiotics, and all of a sudden he's right as rain, and he's running around the town murdering all these soldiers of David's, and it's like, how did that happen? He's all of a sudden just fine. It's like he never had that injury. And that bugged me. And it's one of my favorite sections of the game, but I have to set that aside in my brain and accept that as utterly absurd and contradictory to the premise that they had set up within that world. So there's parts of it that I don't accept. Nadine in Uncharted 4, just one such thing. Nathan Drake is this amazing fighter who just... No, it's after that. Later in the game, freaking gets on a tow cable from some vehicle in Madagascar and is swinging behind it and is standing up in mud, taking bullet after bullet, but he's able to climb his way through and take out a couple dozen soldiers that are like armed to the teeth. And he's able to do all this fairly easily. And afterwards he gets up and he and Sam go off and they continue their search for the treasure. But Nadine comes along, and all of a sudden this fairly slender, tall, of course, African-American, Jimi Hendrix looking, even though she's female, character comes out and beats the crap out of Nathan. Now I wouldn't really have a problem with this if it were possible to beat her. Maybe very, very hard, because she is highly trained or something. But in general, when something blatantly disregards its own perception of reality or the rules and bounds that it's set in this game world, which is that Nathan is a highly capable, very lucky, resourceful individual, and then all of a sudden he comes along this chick, and because Naughty Dog was so insistent on having her be this badass, they had scripted sequences where you cannot beat her because she needs to throw you out the window, and then you climb around and that's how you follow the path that they lay out for you. But it could have been any other way. They could have had it so maybe you spend, if you really get everything perfect, all the dialogue prompts correct, and then you do the right combination or something, then you beat her, and then like guards come in and all of a sudden you get shot at, then you run down the hallway, down the stairs, and there's an alternate path, or maybe you even just jump out the window of your own accord or something like that. Just anything other than having a scripted sequence where every other moment in the game you feel like you have at least some chance to overcome these odds. With Nadine, no. And one time I would have been like, okay, it was just for the sake of gameplay. It happens twice in the game, but the second time it happens, it's with two dudes, one of whom just spent like 20 years in prison, and is just fine. Like he's an incredible fighter. He's been working out for that entire 20-year period, and both he and Nathan, who just got done killing a bunch of people, are not able to even pin her down or something, or hit her over the head with a shovel. I mean, it really suspends my disbelief in a bad way. So with Nadine, or with Horizon Zero Dawn, the same type of thing comes along, where some people perceived it as being ham-fisted, where they thought and perceived it as lecturing them on what they should perceive as correct or virtuous with regard to the female gender. And I don't see it that way. I think the game was tasteful. And again, like I said, I thought it was consistent. If there were a problem where all the men were completely helpless and incapable, I'd be like, okay, yeah, no, that's clearly they're having Aloy. They're trying to make her a big badass. I think they try to make her a badass, but I don't think it's specifically regarding her gender at all. I think it's more character driven. They want her to be this badass, so they don't have her have any companions. And as a result, I really don't care about her as a character. and I talked about this in the review, I really don't care about Aloy. I wish I did, but she gives me no reason to. If anything, she gives me a reason not to like her, because she's this sort of self-centered individual who's just trying to find out what happened to her mommy. And at least with Nathan Drake, you find some depth between him and Elena, their interactions, his interactions with Sully, and they've said they want Aloy to be the next Nathan Drake, the next mascot of PlayStation. And in order to do that, you gotta really boost the character building that's going on. Hopefully the sequel does that, and it's more of an emotional trip. Yeah, that did happen. I did fall. I ran right off the cliff in the first time I played it. I just assumed that there was a little ledge there, and I just ran right off. There you go. But that's probably where I should stop with that. But it is interesting because Sony does seem to be pushing this in a lot of their exclusives. For instance, Uncharted: The Lost Legacy, which I made a video on called The Big Game No One Is Talking About, because it's essentially its own game. It's a story expansion, but as far as we know, it doesn't feature Nathan Drake. It's like 20 hours. It includes the largest level of any Uncharted game ever made. It is a big thing, and apparently it's going to star Chloe and Nadine, who I think is so ham-fisted as a character, trying to be the powerful woman, that I think it breaks all sense of reality that the game spends the entire other portion, the entire rest of the game. It tries to build up this perception that this is a real story, and then Nadine comes in and it just totally shatters it. But it also stars Chloe, who we saw in the gameplay that they released at E3. I think they released it at E3. But they do all this, and it's just, I'm going to switch this before we get into spoilers for Horizon Zero Dawn. For your sake, I'm being considerate. But it's Chloe. I think she should have been killed off in like the second Uncharted or third, or not. She wasn't in the third Uncharted. I think it was just the second. But I think they should have killed off more characters just in general. I think they should have killed off multiple people. That's just me. I think Sully probably should have died in the second or third game, because those games always commit. They're like, we're going to totally kill him off. We're going to totally kill a character off. And then it never happens. Even at the end of Uncharted 4, Sam should die. Like, they even set it up. He's pinned under a piece of wood, and then they're like, nah, it's okay. It's okay. Happy ending. Drives me crazy. I just want someone to die because I'm a masochist, and I don't like being happy. This caffeine really works for the show. I need to just down caffeine before every recording. That's how I'm gonna get through these episodes. I'm telling you. It's the secret potion. Okay, so now that that's kind of out of the way, just recapping with The Lost Legacy, I could see it being an issue because clearly Nadine has a history of being totally overpowered to portray herself as this strong, empowered chick. With Chloe, a little less so. She was more balanced, I thought, in Uncharted 2, but with them together, you never know. But with Horizon Zero Dawn specifically, I didn't really see any problem with it, which is why I didn't really mention it. I did consider it. There was one time when you show up and there's a sequence where you're sitting around a table. This is in Horizon Zero Dawn. And no spoilers, but you're basically at this council area. It's kind of a flashback, and there's characters, and I kid you not, it looks like a Colgate Crest whatever toothpaste commercial, and it's perfectly diverse. There's a black guy, there's seemingly a very effeminate beta male right there, he's white, and then there's like a very flamboyant gay guy right there, he's Hispanic, which is cool. Then there's a black woman, then there's a person you can't really tell their gender, but they're also black, so it's okay. Then there's a white chick, and then there's a Muslim chick, and then they go, she's even wearing the hijab, and they go all the way around the circle. And I'm like, I can appreciate that they didn't like draw a ton of attention to it, because if you're going to do that, those people hopefully wouldn't walk around saying, well, as a Muslim, I think that Project Zero Dawn should be like this. If they did that, I would have a problem with it, because that's just crappy writing. But they didn't. They kept it subtle. They said these are just people. that are in the story, and there shouldn't be a problem with that. And I agree. I didn't see any problem with it, but it was very transparent as to what they were trying to do. They were trying to be very diverse and openly representative, which isn't an inherently bad thing. It's a bad thing when they ham-fist it and try to lecture you with it, which I didn't feel Horizon Zero Dawn did, which is why I didn't mention it. But with all that said, I do want to talk about Mass Effect Andromeda and the glitches and, frankly, really bad facial animations that are contained therein. As you see on screen right now, this is Mass Effect Andromeda. This is the opening portion. So this is not my gameplay. This was what they showed off a little while back, but looks very good. The environments especially look very, very good, and the problems will present themselves very clearly in a moment when I show you this comparison that I thought did a great job of showing these problems. Now, it doesn't seem super prevalent in every case. Essentially, the accusation is that Mass Effect Andromeda struggles with lack of emotion on human faces, which is typical of open world games. If you go back and you play Fallout New Vegas or Skyrim or something like that, you're kind of blown away at how bad those facial animations are. But you're willing to forgive it because the rest of the game is so good. With Mass Effect Andromeda, people haven't gotten the chance to play the full game, and they're looking for some way of creating some sort of stir, get clicks, whatever, drawing off of the most anticipated game of the year currently, and that, of course, being Mass Effect Andromeda. And the way that they do that is by trying to call out problems with it. Now, sequences like this one, I have no problem with. These sequences look, frankly, decent enough. Not good, not great, nothing compared to even The Witcher 3. I think they had much better facial animations, but you know, it's doable. It's doable, and I think the main reason is that they're not switching models or up-resing it, which I will address in a moment, comparing it to a game that does it really well. But to really, really nail this home, I want to show you a video. Not of my creation. Let me switch over to screen share. This was from XSplit. Definitely check his stuff out. He actually has some really cool videos. But he put this together. I'll mute it just so we can demonstrate this. But he put together this video where he compares. I'm assuming he did this initial comparison. But he compared the animation. So what you're seeing on the left is this model from Mass Effect Andromeda, and on the right you're seeing from a character from the original Mass Effect. And as you can see, the one on the right looks a lot better. It seems like an actual person. The one on the left looks synthetic. It looks like a doll that was molested. It just doesn't look good. It looks shell-shocked. It looks bad. It looks poopy. It just doesn't look good. And I, as somebody who has done a fair amount of animating in his past, I think I know why. After a gulp of caramelizer, which is what they call that drink. This also compares this, whatever the character on the left's name is, with the queen from the, I believe it's from the Blood and Wine DLC from The Witcher 3. And you can even just see the comparison. Now, if I pause it, I want you to look, I'll rewind just a little bit. I want you to compare specifically the foreheads of the characters from basically the nose, like the nostrils up. That's where I want you to watch, because that, like, even you see me talking right now, my eyebrows are moving all around, and like it's furrowed, and I go like this when I'm confused or angry, or it all switches around. And it's very emotive. Some people are more bland with how they talk. If they're tired, if they're energetic, whatever, that's fine. But in general, people are emotive with their eyebrows, which is why, like in high school, there was a guy that didn't ask a girl out to we were a small high school. Okay, we were a small high school, Ridgeview Classical Schools. And so we didn't have a lot of options for dates to dances, but I think it was for prom, like our senior prom, there was one guy who didn't ask anybody out even though there were girls that were going alone. And this guy was straight. He was single. Don't worry. It wasn't like he was a closeted gay or something. He was straight, but he was too nervous, too shy, or whatever, or too cheap, whatever it was, to ask a girl out to the dance and make her senior prom memorable. So what did we do? Well, for our senior prank part of it, we secretly waxed his eyebrows, and it was really funny. It was really funny. I was not directly involved, but I did see the aftermath, and it was funny. But afterwards, we couldn't tell if the guy was angry or smiling or laughing or confused because there were no eyebrows. So it was just like every emotion was exactly the same, because you couldn't tell. And he looked like somebody out of VeggieTales, because he was just like, oh, that's awesome or sad or whatever. You couldn't tell. And that's basically what's going on here. You can't tell because the eyebrows and the forehead doesn't move at all. So let me go back and show you this again. The Witcher 3 example really demonstrates it well. Watch, like, you see her eyes start to squint. Nostril up, nostril up. That's where I want you to look. Nostril up, as these characters are explaining stuff. You see the character on the right? There's confusion, there's doubt, there's skepticism, all contained in those squints of the eyes, the tilting of the head, shaking it. Even freaking Geralt, who is like stripped of all emotion as part of becoming a Witcher, he's more emotive than this guy. It's so bad. It's so bad. And this game is 2 years older. 2 years older. What are you doing? They spent 40 million on this Mass Effect Andromeda game, and they couldn't get something better than that. Now, the reason I think this is, and I said it had to do with model swapping and scene swapping, which is a common practice in these games. The way that Horizon Zero Dawn did it was a little different. For conversations that you had or cutscenes that you had, the camera switched to a really wide aperture, so you had really shallow depth of field, which was intentional. And the reason they did that was not just because it looks good or it's artsy fartsy, but because it only has like this area in focus. All the rest is blurred out. And what that allows you to do is, even when you're in a big field, it allows you to just focus on the character model. So you can upscale it, you can upres it, you can use more bones in the face to actually link and anchor certain facial emotions and movements. You can also upscale improve and up-res the textures on the character models, and lower the texture quality of distant models, because they're all of a sudden they're not in focus. They're already blurry, so you don't need them to be high res. And that's how you can get on the PS4 something that looks like what you see in Uncharted 4, which I shall show you. This footage, I was going to go capture my own, but I didn't get around to it. As I said, I've had to record this episode twice. But the Rad Brad recorded this, so thank you, Mr. Rad Brad. But this is a little sequence from Uncharted 4. You see they're climbing around. This is gameplay. And you have control of the character here. So you're able to move around. You see the distant areas are all in focus. You can see that clearly. The textures are all really high quality, smooth frame rates. Even though we're dealing with a console exclusive, they're steady or consistent. And you see his face right now, the character on the right, Sam, young Sam. It's fairly low res. It's not very high quality, but it works. That's what you're dealing with Mass Effect in Mass Effect Andromeda. With regard to this game, as you'll see in just a moment, once little Nathan figures out how to jump. There you go, Brad. Yeah, no, go ahead. You can do it. You can do it. Essentially, what will happen is there's going to be a switch here in just a second, a scene swap. And it's being rendered in real time. They aren't pre-rendered, but you'll understand what I mean. Go right over. Go right over. I don't want to skim ahead because I want it to be natural. Just go. What are you doing, Rad? There you go. He figured it out. So you go down And watch how seamless this is. And boom. Switches. All of a sudden, the character models are greatly improved. You watch the facial animations compared to what we just saw in Mass Effect Andromeda. It's night and day. Night and day. And this is being run off of a PS4. Even so. So you have to ask, why is this possible and how can they do this? Well, it's pretty straightforward. So when they do these switches, they can dedicate all of their power, all of their computing power to one particular scene or one particular set of objects. In this case, the motorcycle and the characters most importantly. And you see the framing is set up so that you don't have huge scale things in the background that are distracting. They tend to do these sequences in simpler areas, or if they do them in big areas, they do it with a shallower depth of field so that you don't have to render all that stuff in the distance, taking up valuable resources. So it's all about allocation of resources, essentially. Allocation of computing resources. And these games, the Naughty Dog titles, do a really, really good job of this, and they do it seamlessly. They very quickly can swap out the textures and get it all ready and good to go. With Mass Effect Andromeda, I think what they're doing, and I think the problem is that they aren't switching character models and they aren't doing that swap at all. What they seem to be doing is that this model that you're seeing on screen is the exact same model that you walk around with. There's no swap. There's no upscaling. There's nothing. And it's something that we've come to expect from games with Horizon Zero Dawn. Now, it's harder to do when you're allowed to create your own character naturally. Just different bone structures, different whatever. It's hard to do really accurate, high quality facial animations for your character, which is understandable. Like that character's mouth looks ridiculous. So these models are the same ones that were just used in the cutscene instead of swapping them for a higher res one. Now, the main complaints is that the NPC models aren't any better. They don't swap either. Now, the reason this might have been an artistic choice, as I've said before, if it was an artistic choice, it was an autistic choice, because it's bad. It shouldn't be there. It shouldn't be made. It was a poor decision, because you end up with really low quality animations in general, and this is throughout the entire game, in a game that prides itself on being more of an RPG, having lots of discussions that you can have with various characters. And the fact that you decided to lower that experience for the sake of a consistent experience, or perhaps trying to make everything more, I don't know, uniform or something. I don't know why they would do this. Maybe they did it so that you could get into conversations quicker. But even then, it doesn't seem to get any quicker. It seems to still delay just like any other game. The Witcher 3 was never that much slower. And The Witcher 3 did the character model swap that all of these other games did. So I think it also has a lot to do with allocation of resources, at least in terms of manpower on the development team. As I said, this game cost $40 million to make, and they had a fairly large team working on it for the majority of 5 years. So you have to ask yourself, like, how did this get overlooked? Like, such a key part of the game, how did they just completely bypass this? And I think what it is that the management, whoever was leading up the game, thought that, well, people are going to wear their helmets. They're going to, like, the facial animations aren't that crucial because we're going to have discussions. They're going to be in armor and all this. You're going to be talking with aliens pretty soon after these opening hours, which is true. The alien animations aren't really a big deal because we don't know how aliens talk, so you can't tell if it's realistic or not because they're aliens. They're fictional. So when an alien talks just from the nostrils down, you can't tell if it looks weird or not. He's a freaking alien. He's supposed to look weird. So, but it's when you talk with humans that it's doubtful. And I think they focused on a lot of different things. I think they focused on environmental graphics and looks, which look very good. The light bouncing off of her shoulders in that moment was very impressive, to be frank and to be fair. The lighting in general in this engine looks really, really good, and I'm really happy about that. I do want to jump to like a combat section. Maybe I can demonstrate the combat and how that looks really good. Here we go. We can get around there, or at least environments. See, these environments look pretty good. And so I can see why that. Then when you're wearing the helmet, it's like, okay, I don't really care that much. It still could be better, but it's not a deal breaker for me. But the problem is when the helmets are off, essentially. So people were asking the creative director, or what, game designer, what's his role? I'm trying to see. Mass Effect Andromeda's lead designer, Ian Fraser. So let me swap to this share. Ian Fraser, he said that the game's day one patch will not alter game's animation, which makes sense if you've ever done any animating. So Charling, or at John Charling, said, so no improvements to animation / making the characters look more natural while talking. Other than that, I like the game. And Ian Fraser, the game director, said, at day one, no, that ship has sailed. We'll have more patches later on, but exactly what goes into them is still being discussed, or still in discussion. Which makes sense if you've ever done any animating, because if the problem really is actual, like, animating, it's not a glitch. If it's a glitch, it could be patched. But that glitch would have to be so massive that it's just not taking into account keyframes and bones from here on up, which is nearly impossible that a glitch that severe would make it into every copy of the game. Somebody would need to get fired if that happened. But instead, see, like, look at these environments. They look really, really good. I am impressed by them. But instead, rather what it is, it seems like it was a conscious choice, instead of putting money and research and time into developing that swappable scene that Uncharted does so well, and that other games like even Horizon did very, very well, or The Witcher 3 did very, very well. They instead chose to develop these environmental spaces a lot more, which it's their prerogative. I'm going to play this game. I'm going to review it for you guys. I believe I have a sponsor for those videos, which I'm excited about. We'll probably talk about that more in a little bit. But though, like, I am going to look at this and analyze it critically, because it's very possible that once you get out of the opening sections, those problems don't really present themselves because you're in armor, and it was a reasonable decision for them to make. I don't know yet, because I haven't played it, and I won't play it till Tuesday. So I am going to be open-minded, because it's very possible that all of these accusations of the animations being horrible and the writing being terrible are just that. They're accusations, or maybe they're just for the opening hours when they're trying to set everything up. It's possible. Mass Effect games, at least from the ones I've tried, and yes, I have, since last week, I got all 3 of the original games on sale from Kingwin, and I haven't completed all of them, of course, but I've been going through all of them to get a taste of what they are, and all of them seem to have fairly slow starts. They kind of work up to their stride, and it's possible this is the same way. So no day one patch that's going to fix all of this, which makes sense, because in order to fix new keyframes, new bone structures in the face, you'd have to basically rework the entire animation system, which would take a lot more than a week, and would be very, very expensive, and likely probably isn't even worth their time. So I would not expect them to even do that. It seems more like an engine problem than a glitch problem. So that doesn't seem very, very possible. Very possible to me. But some people have their hopes up, but you shouldn't, because it's not going to happen. But that does bring up the topic of glitchy releases of games. It does seem to still be relegated to a few developers a fair number of developers have launched games this year that have not had any problems. Horizon Zero Dawn, I ran into 0 frame drops or anything until the last battle, which made sense because there were like 1,000 things on screen. So it made sense that it was stuttering a little bit. And even then it dropped from like 30 to 25. It wasn't game breaking. But like Resident Evil 7, really polished game. Horizon Zero Dawn, they sent that game out for reviews a week before it was to launch. They showed how confident they were in it. Zelda Breath of the Wild, some performance issues when you dock it, but that's more of a Nintendo Switch problem than it is a Zelda problem. The game runs fine when it's not docked. It's when it is docked that there's problems because of, I've heard all different reasons for it, whether it's airflow, whether it's the upscaling techniques, whatever it is, it seems to have issues when it's docked. But in general, games have been fairly polished this year. But people are saying that there's like this trend is continuing, that games are still just as buggy as they were before, and that's just not true. You compare 2017 so far to 2014 at the same time. No, we're doing fine. We're doing really well. And this isn't a bug. Mass Effect Andromeda isn't a bug. These issues aren't bugs. It's development choices. With games like Assassin's Creed Unity, back in 2014, those were bugs. It's a good game, but it wasn't polished. And with all sorts of other games, Fallout 4 even with its really buggy launch, The Witcher 3 had some bugs at launch, not as game breaking. I literally couldn't play Fallout 4 for about 2.5 weeks after launch because it was unplayable on my rig. It just didn't work. It was really frustrating, especially as somebody who had covered it for 6 months. I couldn't play the game I was waiting for the better part of a year and a half. Very heavy anticipation, and that was frustrating. But we haven't had any problems that severe since. Really, game developers have heard our messages and are really taking it to heart. And we saw this from Ubisoft when they talked about the Assassin's Creed next installment of Assassin's Creed, and they said that they have a new policy, which is alpha a year before release. And that makes sense to me, which, if you don't know what that means, essentially you need to have a version of the game, final game, complete a year before launch. So that entire year is spent polishing. So typically you have, like, you build the game. Alpha is when, okay, everything's in there, but it's all kind of disjointed, or we need to polish up how it all connects. And for a lot of games, that alpha comes just 5-6 months before launch, and then they hit a beta maybe a couple months before launch, and then they go and do all that. Even shooters, Battlefield 1 or Battlefront, they put out a beta test. They do this a lot with shooters now, where they have a beta, a public beta, where people can come in and join it, and that's only like a month to a month and a half before launch, and then they spend that month refining it from the beta to the final version. So they're saying now alpha a year before launch, which would mean that for their next Assassin's Creed, if it were coming out in the fall of this year, that means this past fall it had to essentially be completed, and they would just spend this entire year polishing it, which I would be okay with. And that's something that is directly a result of our response, the gaming community's response to Assassin's Creed Unity and other games which had severe problems. And so when you go to Twitter, when you go and you share YouTube videos that are bashing these companies for bad practices, when you talk to your friends about it, when you don't buy their game as a result of it, it makes a difference. And it really does. And you're seeing that all over the place. Mass Effect Andromeda, people saying like, oh, it's EA back at it again. No, this isn't even necessarily an EA thing. This seems like a conscious decision by the game director. If you want to be angry at anyone, be angry at the game directors, because they made this decision to allocate the $40 million that they received in a way that you didn't like. And if you really don't like it, if it ruins the game for you, blame the creative director for them. This isn't a publisher issue. If they pushed microtransactions into the main campaign, I would understand your frustration. But this is just bad facial animations. It's not a publisher issue, it's a development issue. And so it's not quite fair to blame EA specifically for this. And I'm somebody who has big frustrations with EA in the past. I think they do good work a fair amount of the time, but they also have made some big mistakes in the past. And I'm not afraid to call them out when they've made those mistakes, or when they will inevitably make more mistakes. But this is one particular instance when you just can't go blaming the publisher for this particular hiccup, because it's just not their fault. It just isn't. It's a development issue. So that's all I have to say about Mass Effect Andromeda. I do want to talk about some news that came out 2 days ago. I'm filming this on the 17th, so on St. Patty's Day, and this came out on the 15th. So Outlast 2, a game I've been very, very excited for. So I know a lot of you aren't necessarily big horror game fans, but I do enjoy it. I did videos a while back in a series called The Rationalists, kind of mocking how me and my friends played horror games together. And we would all sit around and record as we would play through a horror game, and we called ourselves the Rationalists, because it's like we're clearly not rational. And we'd go through the games and we had a good time, and it was fun. So we played through Outlast, the original one, and we also played through Five Nights at Freddy's and all those types of games, and had a really good time. And with regard to the original Outlast, I have personally probably played through it approaching, I'd say, maybe 4 or 5 times all the way through, once on Nightmare difficulty, and it's a good game. It's a really good game. It's challenging, it's freaky, and it's terrifying every time you play through it. And Outlast 2 promised to really take it up a notch, which, just based on the demo, based on the gameplay footage, based on everything they've shared, seems to really follow through on that promise. There's even a section in the gameplay that they released where you are essentially walking on a bunch of corpses in a little area with an upside down cross's shadow cast on it, and you have to walk on these dead, some people have said they're like dead babies essentially, but I can't tell if they're babies or if they're children or if they're adults. I can't really tell from the gameplay. It's probably explained in the actual game if it is. Either way, it's horrifying and it's disgusting and horrible. And you have to walk across them to continue, and you have to hear the crunches of the bones, and it's horrible. And it's little things like that, not even jump scares, but it's a little psychological horror like that where you're like, this is messed up. This is bad. And some people, they can't handle it. I showed it to my sister who did those Rationalist videos with me, and she said, I can't play Outlast 2. I won't be able to, because it's too dark. It's too bad, which is understandable. That's their goal. Red Barrel's studios said that they aren't willing to release this game until they are terrified to play it, even after having made it, which says something. And of course, they're a horror game developer, they're going to say that. But I think it says something if you are making a horror game, you want to be scared of it before you release it. That's fair. And they seem to really succeed with it. So Outlast 2 is coming out April 25th, I believe, is the official launch date. And it, yes, April 25th. And it's really hyped up. People are excited for it. It was initially supposed to come out, I think, this past fall. They had some development issues. They pushed it back, and then they pushed it back further, and now it's set for April 25th. Hopefully it also comes out. Now, this all has to do with Australia, as always. Horror games in Australia do not mix. What am I talking about? Well, in Australia, you have to get classification before a game can be sold on the market, which makes sense. It's kind of like the MSRB or whatever it is rating in the US. You have to have it rated, whether it's, what are the ratings? T or E for everyone, T for teen, T 13 plus or whatever, M for mature, adults only, and I think that's their full list. They also have like the kitty version, but whatever it is. In Australia, it's the same type of thing, and this is evaluated by taking the game, going through it, and then you follow the Australian guidelines for the classification of computer games, and they go through basically this checklist and determine what is and isn't allowed. And as you can see here, I pulled up the original Outlast. This is how they ranked it. They ranked it as under themes, it was high impact. So that would mean, like, in terms of the actual topics, with like the priest lighting himself on fire, with you dealing with cannibals and all that stuff. High impact. Violence, strong impact. I'm surprised it wasn't higher, but I guess because you don't typically see a lot of them doing the killing, it's maybe less so. But still, like, you land on dead bodies, I would think that would be higher, but still, strong impact. Language, moderate impact. I don't remember the language being that bad, so maybe I'm just desensitized to it since I hang out with a lot of Scotsmen and a couple Polacks, but this is that the right term for a Polish person? Polak? I think it is. That's what he calls himself anyway. But language, moderate. Drug use, there isn't really any, other than the priest stabbing you with a needle. So I guess that would count. I'm surprised there's nothing given there. Nudity, strong impact. Yeah, I guess there's a sequence. The DLC, if you're including DLC, like, eventually you see an entire picture of your Schwanzen as the groom tries to cut you open and turn you into his bride. It's really freaky. So there's straight nudity in that. And then sexual impact. I could see that there are some weird hints and weird things that go on. You run into this guy that's like jerking it over a pile of dead bodies. It's pretty messed up. But that's for the original one. That's for the original Outlast. And this game, apparently, it was the sexual themes was off their chart, which is why it failed. And spoiler alert. Okay, spoiler, if you don't want to know anything about this game, this isn't a direct spoiler. It, in vague terms, mentions why it failed. But if you don't want to know anything about it, don't listen any further. Go ahead, click away. I won't have my feelings hurt. But I'm going to describe to you why the game failed this little chart thing. So, IGN has received a copy of the Australian Classification Board report detailing the reason Outlast 2 was refused classification, essentially banning it from sale. So, until this piece of the game is removed, if it ever is, the game cannot be sold legally in Australia, which promotes piracy, which I don't think they really realize. In the modern day, if a gamer wants Outlast 2, they're going to get Outlast 2, whether they buy it or not. All you're doing now is encouraging piracy. So when this happens, when you tell adults what they can and can't consume, it's kind of pathetic. Sorry, Australians, if you're watching. I'm sure as a gamer, you'd be upset about this. Like, I don't think if you're a gamer and you're from Australia, if you are, comment down below. I'm interested in hearing what you have to say about this. I really am, because I can't imagine that you're a gamer, and even if you're very progressive or enlightened or whatever, you would, I can't imagine that you would be for this. This seems like something that you would obviously stand against and be like, no, I want a video game. I'm an adult. I'm 25 or whatever. I can determine what I want or don't want to consume. But apparently they don't think you can. They're going to treat you like children. So they have it banned right now, but Outlast 2 fell afoul of classification guidelines due to a rape scene during a cutscene in the game, viewed in first person. Okay. Sounds pretty typical of Outlast. Again, there was a sequence in the DLC where you are essentially stripped down and the groom is trying to alter your body to make you into his bride. You even walk past this sort of decoration that he's created with dead bodies, where he mutilated this man into having breasts and having like his own head coming out of his crotch to make it look like he was giving birth, and messed up stuff. And so this isn't anything necessarily new. The event occurs amongst a group of gray-skinned humanoid creatures involved in, quote, what appears to be a ritualistic orgy. Been in a few of those. As the lead character... stop highlighting it all. I just want a section. As the lead... I'm going to have a heart attack. As the lead character, Blake, yells at the creatures to get away from his wife, who is shackled to a platform above, a female creature, her grayish breasts bared, bared or barred. I don't remember which is which. It's only one R difference. BRED pushes him onto his back, holds his arms to the ground, and repeatedly thrusts her crotch against him, as Blake protests, saying, no, stop that. The creature thrusts again before placing its face over his midsection and then sitting up and wiping its mouth. Although much of the contact between the creature and Blake is obscured by it taking place below screen, the sexualized surroundings and aggressive behavior of the creature suggests that it is an assault which is sexual in nature. The board is of the opinion that this, combined with Blake's objections and distress, constitutes a depiction of implied sexual violence. And the board notes that such depictions of implied sexual violence, quote, cannot be accommodated within the rated 18 plus category, so the game must be refused classification. So because there's a depiction, it doesn't even necessarily need to be approving this. Remember, the game isn't saying this is a good thing. It's clearly a bad thing in the game, but according to this, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's either way. If it's showing it at all, it's not allowed. This is why a lot of people are saying that the modern sort of some people, I mean, the people that started this board, I looked it up, would classify, at least in the US, as members of the left. They would be more liberal on the spectrum. And people call it, the more libertarian people like myself call this the regressive left, because you're actually arguing for less freedom. All throughout human history, especially recent human history, people have typically argued for more freedom, whether it's the American Revolution, the French Revolution, whether it's whatever steps forward in human history, people have argued for more freedoms, more rights to liberty and the self-pursuit of whatever. In this case, this is the first generation where people are okay with demanding less freedom, with demanding and having these people in power who, even with rating a game for 18 and older, it isn't good enough. Even if the game is saying this is a bad thing, you can't even mention it. You can't even depict it. You can't even show it. And it's why some people call it, the regressive left, the new Puritans. Like in the 90s, it was the religious right who were against video games and violent stuff. They were saying, you know, video games make serial killers, and saying that the Columbine massacre was caused by Marilyn Manson and video games, and it just frankly absurd stuff. Now they've swapped places. The religious right tends to be more for freedom, not always, but they tend to be more on that side, or they just don't get involved. While the sort of religious left, zealot left, or whatever you want to call it, tends to be against it for this type of thing. So whether you're right, left, center, or wherever you line on the political spectrum, I would hope that we could agree that people should have the right to play a video game, even if a grayish, a female creature with grayish breasts should be allowed to be depicted, even if it is horrifically disturbing. If you choose to see that and choose to view it, you should be allowed to. This sort of religious zealot-like control of people's minds and thought processes, I find disturbing, much more disturbing than something I see in a video game. And I would hope that people would agree with that. Let me know your thoughts down below. I quickly do want to talk, before we run out of time, I do want to quickly talk about the channel and where we're going. So if that's all, that's all we're going to really talk about in terms of gaming topics, I do want to talk about the channel for a little bit, for just like a few minutes. So if you want to click away, thank you for watching. But if you want to hear some stuff with the channel, the live stream next week, then please hang around. So we're gonna have some little kind of shifts in. Well, let me click back to gameplay so that you have something interesting to look at. Now that we have some shifts going on with the channel, as many of you know, I am a full-time student. College student. I go to school full time, and I also work essentially 2 or 3 jobs depending on how you count it, how you look at it. And so I'm very, very busy. And coming back this week is the first week back from spring break. There's a lot to do, and I'm going to be also opening a show that I'm in, a play that I'm in called The Triumph of Love. We're doing the musical version of it, if you're familiar. If you're familiar with it, I'm playing Agis, and it's going to be really fun. But I open the show actually next Friday at 7:30 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. And I have to be at location at like 6 p.m. That's my call time. Now I get off work at about 1. So my hope is that I can get home right around probably 1:30. And live stream at 2, roughly, for about an hour or so. And that's 2 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So 1 p.m. Pacific. And what would that be? 3 or 4 Atlantic or Eastern time. So around there. Now, the best way that you can follow this, if anything changes, is to go over to my Twitter account, at Luke Stevens TV, and follow me, because I'll be tweeting out, okay, I'm going to live stream today at this time, T-minus 5 hours, whatever. I'll keep you updated, all that. Plus, you'll get notifications when I go live and all of that. And so if you really want to watch live, if you want to participate in the discussion, leave comments, and I can read those in real time, do that, and follow me on Twitter if you don't already. Hit the little notification thing so you get actual notifications when I tweet. I don't typically tweet unless I have something to say. I'm not one of these people that spams with like, I just got a new t-shirt. I don't do that. So when I tweet, there's actually something worthwhile. So I plan to do it around 2 p.m. next week before that show opens. I in the future will probably switch to more of an evening slot, because that's typically easier for people, including myself. But for the next 2 weeks, I'm going to be performing these shows on Friday nights, so I won't be able to obviously live stream at that point. And how it'll work is I'll film, or I'll live stream and film at the same time the show, and then afterwards, the next day on Saturday, I will upload the full version to YouTube as a full video, just like this one is, so you can watch that if you weren't able to make the live stream. But just so you know, follow me on Twitter. It's looking like 1 p.m. Pacific time next week, next Friday, which sounds fun. Sounds good to me. It's going to be a blast. Now, videos in coming week also might be a little more sparse, probably 2 Talk Gaming extras in the next week. I'm gonna do probably a countdown for Horizon or Mass Effect Andromeda, hopefully sponsored. I do want to make sure that the sponsor's okay with me being critical of the game either which way, because if I don't have my integrity, I don't really have anything. So I'm going to make sure that I can do that before I upload anything. And then with the following videos, I want to do a gameplay session. I want to also do a full review of Mass Effect. I'm going to do all of that, and I think I found a sponsor for all of those, so it's going to be really, really cool. And I mean, that's basically where we're at right now. It's looking really good. Once the show ends and once school gets back in session and we get back into the groove of it, everything will return back to normal, and we'll get the show going live, and I'll be able to throw in some gameplay, and we'll just continue to grow. It'll be a blast, but that can only happen with your help, which I know that you are willing to do, because you're obviously watching this hour-long plus video, which I greatly appreciate. But I'll stop chatting your ear off. I'm going to go eat some corned beef because I'm awesome and possibly Irish, despite the hair. But thank you for watching for all this time. Hopefully the sound worked this time around and I don't have to record it a third time. If you're seeing this, it obviously was at least to my satisfaction, or I'm just incredibly lazy. But thank you for watching. I love each and every single one of you. Remember, follow me at Luke Stevens TV on Twitter. Like this video, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace out. Love you. Bye.